By the time the news broke, the woman they had treated like she didn't belong had already left the building. She hadn't made a scene. She hadn't raised her voice. She had simply picked up her bag, walked to her car, and made 3 phone calls. That was all it took. 3 calls, and by the following morning, the Hargrove Grand Hotel had lost its largest corporate account, its lead investor, and its reputation, in that order. But to understand what happened, you have to go back to the Tuesday afternoon, when Nola Beckett walked through the front doors of the Hargrove Grand. With nothing but a carry-on and a reservation she had made under her company's name. The lobby of the Hargrove Grand was the kind of place designed to make certain people feel unwelcome without ever saying so directly. The marble floors were the color of cream. The floral arrangements were taller than most men. The staff wore expressions of polite indifference that could shift, very quickly, depending on what they saw coming through the door. What they saw when Nola walked in was a black woman in her mid-40s wearing dark jeans, a well-worn gray zip-up, and running shoes that had actual miles on them. She had a small duffel bag over one shoulder and her phone in her hand, scrolling through something that clearly had her attention. She didn't look up at the chandelier. She didn't slow down to admire the flower arrangements. She walked the way people walk when they've stayed in enough 5-star hotels to stop being impressed by the lobbies. The front desk had 2 people on duty. One was a younger man, named Philip, who was organizing keycards and keeping his head down. The other was a woman named Courtney, who had worked at the Hargrove Grand for 11 years and considered herself its unofficial gatekeeper. Courtney watched Nola cross the lobby. She noted the jeans, she noted the sneakers, she noted the bag that was not a Louis Vuitton, not a Rimawa, not anything she recognized. She made a decision before Nola reached the desk. "Can I help you?" Courtney said. The words were correct. The tone was not. Nola looked up from her phone. Checking in. Reservation under Beckett Solutions. Courtney typed something slowly. "I don't see anything under that name." "It may be under Nola Beckett." She spelled it, more slow typing. "I'm going to need a credit card and a photo ID." Nola set her phone face down on the counter and reached into her bag. She handed over both without comment. Courtney examined the ID for slightly longer than necessary. Then she looked at the credit card. Then she looked at Nola. Then she looked back at the computer screen with an expression that suggested she had found something wrong, even though nothing was wrong. "I see the reservation," she said finally, "but I'm going to need to verify the corporate account. We have a policy for third-party bookings. My assistant booked it through our company account. We've stayed here before. I understand that. But our policy requires additional verification when the cardholder isn't physically." "The card is in my name," Nola said. "I'm physically here." Courtney smiled the way people smile when they've decided to be patient with someone they consider beneath them. "Of course, but corporate accounts require. How long will this take?" "It shouldn't take long. If you'd like to take a seat." Courtney gestured toward a cluster of chairs near the window, the ones closest to the door, the ones farthest from the desk. Nola did not move. "I've been traveling since 4 this morning. I'd prefer to stand here." Something shifted in Courtney's face. It was small, barely visible. But Philip saw it. He had worked the desk long enough to know what it meant. He kept his eyes on the keycards. "Of course," Courtney said. "Let me just make a call." She picked up the phone at the desk and turned slightly away. Nola watched her. There was no particular expression on Nola's face. She had learned, a long time ago, that expressions cost you more than they cost the person who deserved them. A man emerged from a door behind the desk. His name was Brendan Forsyth, and he was the head of guest services, which meant he handled situations that front desk staff escalated. He walked with the energy of someone who had been told there was a problem and had already decided, before seeing it, what kind of problem it was. "Hi there," he said. "I understand there's some confusion about your reservation?" "There's no confusion on my end," Nola said. "We just want to make sure everything is in order. Our corporate accounts have a specific verification process. Your website doesn't mention this process. Your booking confirmation didn't mention this process. The woman at the desk hasn't been able to tell me exactly what the process is. Brendan smiled. The same smile. Courtney had smiled. It must have been something they taught. We take security very seriously. For the comfort of all our guests, is there a manager I can speak with? Brendan straightened slightly. I am the guest services director. Then I'm asking you directly. Is there a reason my reservation is being flagged that you're willing to state clearly? The lobby had gotten quieter, not silent. There were still people moving through, still the sound of rolling luggage and distant music. But in the immediate vicinity of the front desk, the air had shifted. A couple in resort wear who had been waiting to check in had drifted a few feet to the side. A bellman who had appeared near the door had found something to do with his hands. Brendan leaned slightly forward. I'm going to ask you to lower your voice. I haven't raised it. You're creating a scene. You're the one who came out here to talk to me. I was talking to the woman at the desk. The couple in resort wear exchanged a glance. The bellman was now very busy with his cart. Brendan said something under his breath. It was quiet enough that Nola almost missed it. Almost. Excuse me, she said. I said we have a lot of guests who need assistance. That wasn't what he had said. Nola looked at him for a moment. Then she looked at Courtney, who was suddenly very interested in her computer screen. Then she looked at Philip, who finally made eye contact with her for the first time. He looked away quickly, but not before she saw what was in his expression. It wasn't cruelty. It was something worse, recognition and helplessness, and the practiced stillness of someone who had learned to survive by staying very small. Nola picked up her phone from the counter. She picked up her ID and her credit card. She put them back in her bag. I'm going to step outside, she said, to no one in particular, and make a few calls. Your room will be ready shortly if you'd like to wait, Courtney began. But Nola had already turned away. Outside, the afternoon light was bright and unhelpful. Nola stood on the sidewalk in front of the Hargrove Grand and looked at her phone. She had 4 missed messages from her assistant, 2 from her CFO, and 1 from a board member named Terrence, who never called unless something needed her attention. She called her assistant first. The reservation is confirmed, her assistant said. I can pull the confirmation number again if I have it, Nola said. That's not the issue. A pause. Her assistant had worked for her long enough to understand what that meant. Do you want me to call the hotel directly? No, Nola said. I'll handle it. She hung up and stood there for a moment, watching a taxi pull up to the curb. A white couple got out with 3 pieces of matching luggage. The bellman who had been so busy inside appeared at the door before they had even finished paying the driver. Nola watched him take their bags. She watched the door open. She watched them walk in without breaking stride, without anyone asking to verify anything. She made the second call. What most people didn't know about Nola Beckett. What the staff at the Hargrove Grand certainly didn't know. And what Brendan Forsyth would spend the rest of his career wishing he had known. Was that she had been in this city for one reason. The Hargrove Grand was owned by the Caldwell Hospitality Group, a mid-sized hotel brand that had been struggling for 3 years with declining occupancy, a renovation backlog, and a reputation problem they hadn't been able to identify the source of. 6 months earlier, Caldwell's board had begun quiet conversations with potential investors about a capital infusion. The negotiations had narrowed, eventually, to 2 parties. One was a private equity firm from London that had made its interest public. The other was Beckett Solutions. Nola had built Beckett Solutions from a 2-person operation in a rented office in Atlanta 16 years ago. She had started with workforce management software for mid-size companies and expanded methodically into hospitality technology. The kind of integrated systems that ran everything from a hotel's booking infrastructure to its point-of-sale terminals to its staff scheduling. She knew the Caldwell Hospitality Group's technology stack better than most of their own executives did, because Beckett Solutions had quietly become a vendor for 4 of their 11 properties in the past 2 years. The meeting she had come to attend was scheduled for Wednesday morning. She had arrived a day early to walk the property, eat in the restaurant, observe the lobby without being observed herself. It was something she did before every major acquisition conversation. She had learned it from a mentor who had told her once, "You don't buy a hotel from the boardroom. You buy it from the lobby floor." She had booked the reservation under her company name. She had dressed the way she dressed when she was working. She had walked through the door of the Hargrove Grand, expecting nothing unusual. What she had gotten instead was 11 minutes at the front desk, a request to take a seat near the door, a guest services director who had said something under his breath that she had almost missed, and a bellman who had materialized for two guests with matching luggage while she was still standing outside with her bag. 11 minutes. That was all it had taken to understand the source of the Caldwell Group's reputation problem. She stood on the sidewalk and made the second call. Her second call was to Terrence. Terrence had been on the board of Beckett Solutions for 9 years. Before that, he had spent 22 years in investment banking. And before that, he had grown up in a neighborhood in Baltimore where nobody's parents had investment banking money. He answered on the second ring. "Where are you?" he said. "Standing outside the Hargrove Grand," she said. "A beat. You're already there?" "I came early to look around. And?" she told him. She told him about Courtney and the slow typing and the verification policy that didn't exist. She told him about Brendan Forsyth and the smile and the thing he had said under his breath. She told him about Philip, who had looked at her for exactly 1 second before looking away. She told him about the couple with the matching luggage and the bellman who had appeared from nowhere. Terrence was quiet for a moment. "What do you want to do?" he said. "I want to think about it tonight," she said. "But I want you to pull everything we have on their staff training protocols and their HR incident records. We have access to that from the vendor contracts. We have access to 4 properties' data. Cross-reference it. I want to know if this is a property-level problem or a brand-level problem." Another pause. "If it's brand-level, then we're not buying a hotel," Nola said. "We're buying a liability." She hung up and looked at the Hargrove Grand's facade. It was a beautiful building. Limestone and glass, 12 stories, a green awning that had probably looked very elegant 20 years ago, and was now slightly more faded than it appeared in photographs. She had stayed in worse places. She had built her company in worse places. She went back inside. At the front desk, Philip was alone. Courtney had moved to the back office. Brendan was nowhere visible. Philip looked up when she came in. He didn't look away this time. "Your room is ready, Ms. Beckett," he said. His voice was careful. "I apologize for the wait." She studied him for a moment. He was young. Mid-20s, she guessed, with the tightly controlled expression of someone who had learned to make himself invisible at work. She recognized it. She had worn that expression herself, in other lobbies, in other buildings, in the early years before she had learned that making herself invisible was not the same as being safe. "Thank you," she said. He handed her the keycard. Their fingers didn't touch, but he held it out in a way that was deliberate. Facing the right way, the room number visible. His posture straightened slightly, as if standing at his full height was the only thing he could offer her at this particular moment. She took the card. She went upstairs. Room 814 had a good view of the street below. She stood at the window for a while, with her shoes off, watching the traffic, eating a granola bar from her bag. She had been awake since 4. She had a flight debrief call at 6, a dinner with a potential tech partner at 8, and a board presentation at 9 tomorrow morning that she had been preparing for the better part of 3 months. She opened her laptop. She opened the file she had built on the Caldwell Group. 200 pages of financials, operational data, market positioning, property-level performance metrics. She had read it so many times she could navigate it by memory. She went to the section on staff training and read it again, this time looking for something different. What she found was what she had suspected. The Caldwell Group had no standardized service training across its properties. Each location ran its own onboarding. There was a corporate code of conduct document that was 17 pages long and had last been updated 4 years ago. There was a DEI policy that consisted of 3 paragraphs. There was nothing, no protocol, no process, no accountability structure. That would have prevented what had happened at the front desk that afternoon. She picked up her phone and called Terrence again. Brand level, she said, without preamble. He already knew. The incident records from the 4 properties we have access to. There are 14 complaint records flagged as service disputes over the past 18 months. 3 of them have language that suggests the complaints were about discriminatory treatment. None of the 3 were escalated above property level. Were they resolved? 2 are marked closed. 1 is still open from 8 months ago. She set the phone down on the desk without hanging up and looked out the window. Below, someone was walking a dog on the sidewalk in front of the hotel. The dog was interested in a planter. The person was interested in their phone. The Hargrove Grand's green awning was visible at the edge of the frame, slightly faded, very still. She picked up the phone again. I want to talk to legal in the morning, she said. Before the board presentation. About the acquisition? About our options. If we move forward with the investment, I want to understand what liability we're assuming for their existing operational culture. And if we don't, she paused. I want to understand what it looks like to withdraw interest. Publicly. Terrence was quiet. Publicly. If 3 guests filed complaints about discriminatory treatment and the company didn't escalate a single one, that's not a management failure. That's a decision. I want people to know that kind of decision has a cost, Nola. He said her name the way he said it when he was about to tell her something he thought she might not want to hear. This will get attention. I know. It'll be uncomfortable. I know. People will have opinions about whether you're doing this because of principle or because it's strategically useful to your reputation. People have opinions about everything I do, she said. I'm used to it. A long pause. All right, he said. I'll have legal ready at 7. The dinner at 8 was in a restaurant 6 blocks from the hotel. She walked. The evening air was warm and she was glad of it. Glad to be moving, glad to be outside, glad to have 45 minutes of sidewalk and streetlight, and the ordinary sound of a city doing what cities do at 8 o'clock on a Tuesday. She was halfway there when her phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize. She let it go to voicemail. 3 minutes later, a text. Ms. Beckett, this is Daniel Hargrove. I'd appreciate the chance to speak with you this evening. My apologies for reaching out directly. DH, she stopped walking. Daniel Hargrove was the grandson of the man who had built the Hargrove Grand. He had no operational role at the hotel, hadn't for years, but he still held a seat on the Caldwell Group's board. He was 71 years old. He had grown up watching his grandfather run a hotel that, in its early decades, had not admitted black guests. He had spent the better part of his adult life donating money to organizations that made him feel that history was sufficiently in the past. She looked at the text for a moment. Then she kept walking. She had dinner. She talked about supply chain technology and integration timelines, and what AI-driven scheduling actually looked like in real-world hotel operations. She ate salmon. She drank 1 glass of wine. She was good company. When she got back to the room, there was a second text from Daniel Hargrove. I heard about what happened this afternoon. I want you to know it doesn't represent who we are. She set the phone on the nightstand and went to sleep. The board presentation was at 9. She arrived at 8:45. She was wearing a charcoal blazer, dark slacks, and the same shoes she had worn the day before. She had her laptop and a printed copy of the presentation, and a coffee she had gotten from a place 2 streets over that a woman in the elevator had recommended. The Caldwell Group's boardroom was on the 14th floor of their offices across town. There were 8 people at the table. She recognized most of them from background research. They were looking at her with the particular mixture of enthusiasm and anxiety that characterized people who needed something they were trying not to appear desperate about. She gave them 40 minutes of the presentation. She was thorough and direct, and she answered their questions well. Then, with 10 minutes left, she stopped. I want to address something before we talk next steps, she said. The room shifted. She told them what had happened at the Hargrove Grand. She told them simply, without editorial, the way you tell people facts. The timeline, the interaction, the words that had been said, the words that had almost been missed. She told them about the incident records across the 4 properties. She told them about the 3 complaints that hadn't been escalated. She set the printed pages on the table. The incident records, the HR policy document, the DEI section that was 3 paragraphs. The room was very quiet. My interest in this investment has always been about operational potential, she said. And that potential is real. Your infrastructure is underperforming, but it's fixable. Your occupancy trends are recoverable. Your technology stack needs work, which happens to be what we do. She paused. But what happened yesterday afternoon in your lobby is not a technology problem. It's not a training gap. It's a decision about what kind of company this is, and who gets to feel welcome when they walk through your door. And that decision, made at the property level, not escalated, documented 3 times, and closed without consequence. That tells me something about your brand that no financial model can fix. She looked around the table. Nobody was looking at the presentation screen. I'm not withdrawing my interest today, she said. I'm giving you 30 days. In 30 days, I want to see a concrete, time-bound remediation plan, not a policy document, not a committee, a plan for how this company is going to address what I found in those incident records. I want to see accountability structures that actually function, and I want to see leadership that is willing to name the problem clearly. She closed her laptop. If I see that plan in 30 days, we keep talking. If I don't. She picked up her coffee. Then I'll have my team prepare a statement for our investors explaining why we chose not to proceed. And I'll be specific. She stood. I appreciate your time this morning, she said. I'll show myself out. The story didn't stay quiet. It never does. Not when the numbers are large enough. Not when the name is recognizable enough. Not when someone in the room with a phone decides that what they witnessed is more valuable as information than as a secret. By Thursday morning, a business column had a brief item. By Friday, it had been picked up by 3 outlets. By the following Monday, it was on the front page of the business section, with Nola's name and a photograph taken from a conference 2 years earlier. She was standing at a podium, mid-sentence, looking exactly like someone who knew what she was talking about. The Caldwell Group released a statement. It used the words regret and commitment and zero tolerance in a sequence that sounded like it had been written by someone who had never experienced anything they were expressing regret about. It named Brendan Forsyth's departure and Courtney's suspension pending review. It announced the formation of a hospitality diversity task force. Nola read the statement once. She called Terrence. They named people, she said. They didn't name the policy failures. I saw. That's not the plan I asked for. No, clock's still running. I know, Terrence said. So does their board. In the Hargrove Grand lobby, things were quieter than usual. The floral arrangements were the same height. The marble floors were still cream-colored. The green awning was still slightly faded. Philip was at the front desk on Thursday morning when a journalist came in to ask if anyone had a comment. He told her politely that he couldn't speak on behalf of the hotel. He helped the next guest check in. He made sure the keycard was facing the right way, and the room number was visible, and his posture was straight. He thought about the woman in the gray zip-up who had looked at him for exactly 1 second. He thought about what he had seen in her face in that second. Not anger, not contempt, but something more difficult. Recognition. The specific recognition of someone who has been where you are, who has made the calculation you're making, and who has decided not to make it anymore. He thought about this for a long time. On the 28th day, the Caldwell Group sent Nola a document. It was not a policy document. It was not a committee charter. It was 63 pages, with an implementation timeline, third-party accountability partners, a revised complaint escalation process with mandatory executive review, and a proposed retraining curriculum that had been co-developed with a hospitality equity consulting firm she had actually heard of and respected. She read it over a weekend at her kitchen table in Atlanta, with coffee and reading glasses, and the window open because the weather had finally turned. She made notes in the margins. She called Terrence twice. On Sunday evening, she sent a 2-sentence reply. This is a real start. Call me Monday. Months later, someone asked her about it at a conference. Not the acquisition. That was public by then, announced and covered and analyzed. But the moment at the front desk, the moment when she had stood there for 11 minutes with her ID and her keycard, while the lobby continued to move around her as if she weren't quite visible. What did you think about? The interviewer asked. In that moment? Nola considered the question. She looked out at the audience. She had been in front of audiences like this for years. They had a specific quality of attention, half skeptical, half hoping she would say something they could use. I thought about the first time, she said. Not the first time something like that happened. The first time I decided to stop pretending it hadn't. The room was quiet in the particular way rooms get quiet when they're paying attention. There's a tax, she said. That's the only word I have for it. There's a tax that gets charged every time you walk into a room and someone decides, before you've said a word, that you don't belong in it. And for a long time, I paid it. I paid it. And I kept moving and I told myself it was the cost of getting where I was going. She paused. At some point, you have to decide the tax is too high. Not for your sake, although also for your sake, but because someone's paying it behind you. Because Philip is behind you. Because the person who comes in next week is behind you. And the cost they're being charged is not a line item. It's a policy. It's a culture. It's a decision that has been made, quietly, at every level and never named. She looked down at the table in front of her. Then she looked back up. What I did wasn't brave, she said. I had the resources to make it costly. Most people don't. The fact that it took someone with my resources to make that company pay attention to what their own staff had been documenting for 18 months. She shook her head. That's not a success story. That's an indictment. The room stayed quiet for a moment. Then the applause started. She let it settle. She reached for her water. She thought, briefly, about the lobby, about the marble floors, about the green awning that was slightly more faded than it appeared in photographs, about Philip, standing at his full height, holding out a keycard with the room number facing the right way. She hoped he was still there. She hoped he had stopped making himself small.